This is my best kind of show notes because we didn't touch one of them, not even one of them. I'm not sure which one is Paul Rudd and which one is Lane Green.
Final card here is the ultimate outcome.
Today is Take Your Dog to Work Day.
Oh, like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah. Without further ado, his debut.
Sweet Caroline.
Everybody say hello to Sammy. Is it not good?
I'm just pausing so that you just are at the front of your screen.
I'm so enormously flattered.
Branding is not a bad blind date.
I'm gonna have to take a picture of this.
No, this is agape. This is love.
I really enjoyed this. You did do your homework. You asked great questions.
I'm flattered. Thank you. You just made my day.
Look at you! You are insane!
How did I do that?
You're
How
insane!
did I do that?
You're insane.
I am insane. I'm insane because I'm actually not insane. Apple, the corporation, is insane because my brand new MacBook Pro, like literally as I am talking to Bryan in the green room, it just switched off. It just said, you know what? That's what you can do with yourself, Jaffe. And it switched off. And I was like, what the hell? And then I rebooted it. All of my visual aids, all of my slides are gone. You know, no birthdays. Happy birthday, by the way. If you're celebrating a birthday on Facebook or LinkedIn, you know who you are because I don't know who you are anymore. But all of the introductory slides are just gone. And so this is a different episode of doing the show naked, I suppose. And I'm saying to Bryan in the background, well, what should we do, Bryan? And he's like, you know, he gave me the Bill O'Reilly line. We'll do it live. We'll do it live. No, he didn't. But that's why my AirPod Pros didn't work. So I'm just using the computer. It's insane. I am insane, as Mark Schaefer said. But I think this is so appropriate for having Bryan on the show. You know, we talk about adversity, we talk about pivoting, we talk about timing, we talk about momentum, we talk like everything that Bryan teaches us. I just lived. And as irritated and pissed off as I am and frustrated and disappointed, you know, as the old saying goes, the show must go on. And the show is going on. And I feel bad. Like, I feel bad that I just wish I had his books and, you know, I had all these little visual aids that I wanted to share with him. But you know what, at the end of the day, that's just bells and whistles, smoke and mirrors, because the real important person is not the technology or the retouching, it's the person. This is the father, the founder of Human to Human as a movement. And today we are truly human to human. And we're going to do the show as two human beings interacting with one another. So people are excited for Bryan to be on the show. Susie Weitzman, who just had a birthday, is happy. And Bob says he can't wait. And David says he's turning 50 tomorrow. So don't worry, I'll be back on Monday with with all of this weekend's birthdays as well. And Chip said, I just showed up and missed what happened, but sounds like lots of fun. Yeah, lots of fun. Really, I'm just laughing on the inside at the moment. Well, you know, I can still do a few things today. And one of the things that I can do is the seated soliloquy. Why not? Because the seated soliloquy is absolutely inspired by my guest of Bryan Kramer. So I have a question for you. What can a purple dinosaur teach us about business, about life? Well, apparently quite a lot, starting with the ability to produce talent like Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato. But I digress. I'm talking about Barney's sharing is caring mantra, which applies equally to a 7-year-old as it does to 70-year-old corporations. If you think about it, sharing is really the bridge between the notions of giving and receiving. It connects the two and makes the entire act or transaction a mutual and hopefully a mutually beneficial one. Sharing is one of those things that doesn't really have an owner. For example, I can share something with you, or you can thank me for sharing something with you. But either way, it's the universal language of kindness, generosity, selflessness, or empathy. Or at least it should be. Today in social media, we've had to modify our beliefs and understanding about sharing. For example, there is oversharing, which can either be quantity driven, like as in too much, or quality driven. That was way too personal and uncomfortable. Wait, I'm not finished. We also are finding ourselves sharing way too easily without properly understanding or thinking about the substance behind a snappy or a catchy headline, or worse, sharing something that is patently false or misleading. And so we understand one another, or as we try and understand one another, there also are plenty of selfish reasons behind us sharing, you know, such as robotically retweeting something nice that was said to or about ourselves to our followers. And in doing so, turning the statement, Joseph is such a nice guy, into Joseph is such a total asshole. To quote Bryan Kramer, who is not an asshole, robots can't share, humans share. And so the next time you use technology to share without care, you are pissing off the purple dinosaur, and you wouldn't like him when he's angry. Let's get back to the essence and spirit of sharing and the motivations behind why we share in the first place. Well, I wonder what he has to say about it. I don't have any fancy intros to him, except to say that I'm really thrilled that he's with me. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Wow, that is one of the most extraordinary intros I think I've had in a virtual setting. Thank you so much, and what a human way to be.
Yeah, I mean, and which it's just we just had to take it as it came. And I said to you, in fairness, I said, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to reschedule for another day? And you're like, let's just do it.
Hey, this is how life happens, right? Very imperfectly perfect.
Imperfectly perfect, which, by the way, was one of my seated soliloquies a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to send that to you afterwards. I called it Imperfectly Perfect. I'll tell you where it actually came from. I was going for a run, which we're going to talk about, and you know, I'm by the way about 15 or 16 pounds down in the pandemic, and I was listening to Howard Stern's interview of Seth Meyers. And they were talking about the efficiencies, right, of working from home, saving on the commute, like all the obvious reasons, Zoom, blah, blah, blah. But then they started talking about how they missed, you know, the water cooler and shooting the breeze, shooting the shit, you know, with coworkers. And, hey, did you watch what happened on Game of Thrones last night? And they actually concluded, or you know, what Seth said is you kind of need the imperfections and the inefficiencies and the friction to be, you know, it is as much part of the whole value proposition as the efficiencies. And I just thought it was a beautiful way. I called it, imperfectly perfect.
You know, one of my favorite people or things to quote is Gaylord Fokker.
Yeah.
If you've seen Meet the Parents, it's a the actor was Ben Stiller, and the movie, which was now probably about 20 plus years ago, believe it or not, when the first one came out, and it was about a guy who was doing everything in his heart that he could do to be liked and to share of himself, and all he could do was screw up at every left and right turn, because he was so imperfectly perfect. Spray painting a cat's tail or lighting a roof on fire. There wasn't a moment where he wasn't screwing something up, but at the same time, we loved him for it. We just identified with this guy who was just trying to be loved, liked, and love others. And so, yeah, it's, celebrate your inner Fokker moments is the point I'm trying to make.
I mean,
and I think we're doing a good job of that right here.
I call that the Zen of Fokker. The Fokker Zen. Fokker Zen. Bob, where's my hashtag that says Fokker Zen?
Fokker Zen.
Fokker Zen. A big part of this, I think, comes down to this idea of peace, right? Of inner peace, or being at peace with who you are, warts and all, or maybe kind of recognizing that the person you are is not maybe the person that you were meant to be. And one of the things is I was saying, it's so funny. We met once. I think it's only been once in our lives at a Geek in South by Southwest. And my understanding of you is you were larger than life. You were big, you were bold, you were brash, you were confident. You were the guy behind me on the TED stage. And it turns out that if anybody thought that that was who you are or who you were meant to be, then they were sorely and sadly mistaken, because you've gone through this incredible, I feel, transformation, one that has been inspirational to people around you. Even though this is the second time that you and I are actually connecting, we've always been connected, and your story has been an inspirational one. And I wonder if you, by the way, I want you to tell us the story, but first of all, here's Bob trying to find whether it's, it's actually Fokker, Fokker Zen, but you know what, he's trying.
He's trying. We love Bob.
So I think it all begins actually on the TED stage, but I would love for you to share your story with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, the story that you're referring to is the story that goes back just 3 years ago, that or 3.5 years ago. So my wife and I owned an agency. It was called Pure Matter. And the agency was doing very well at the time. And we were really doing some great work with Cisco and MasterCard and Netflix and IBM and all these great companies. And one of the things that really created, and if anybody's in the agency world out there, my heart goes out to you, because it is one of the toughest jobs out there. It's full of very high highs and very low lows. It's a difficult business, and it's a very rewarding business. One of the things that I found that needed to be done in order to keep our agency relevant is that we had to reinvent ourselves about every 3 to 4 years, because the industry would just change so radically. And by industry, I mean marketing. Every 3 to 4 years, demand gen would change radically from, as traditional as direct mail to digital, from digital to social, and from social to now we've got AI and augmented reality and bots and automation and the list goes on. And it will change again in 3 to 4 years. And so every time something would shift like that, it would change an agency. Unless you're super niche and super focused. Like I do ads for YouTube for surfers. That's super niche and super specific. And I think those people are going to be doing quite well. We were more of a full service agency, playing in at the end there in social media and digital, a little bit in demand gen. And at the same time, I started writing books and interviewing people and speaking and all of that, which, as you mentioned before, it really caught people's attention. And when H2H showed up on the scene, that is really when my speaking platform took off. That was a fork in the road that I didn't realize was going to change the rest of my life, because I did choose to get out and speak about H2H. And that was a great time of my life. And at the same time, it was probably the change to my life that would bring us fast forward to 3 years ago, where I was speaking to 100-ish days a year and traveling, and at the same time running the agency from the road. So doing that started to, it wasn't glamorous. A lot of people look at travel and, FOMO, which this year seems to be thrown out the window. I don't think we have FOMO yet anymore. But at that time we had a lot of it, and people were thinking that this was a glamorous lifestyle, but it wasn't. I was always ordering turkey club sandwiches at midnight at every hotel across across several continents. And in doing so, I had the opposite of a good country song. I had a very bad country song where I was gaining weight. I got diabetes. I was really just unhealthy. I wasn't working out. I was on planes all the time, landing, speaking, getting back on the plane. As a speaker yourself, it's demanding, and you don't know what time zone you're in and all that kind of stuff. And so I came back one time and talked with my wife, with Courtney, and I said, I think I got to bring it all to a halt. I'm overwhelmed. I'm burned out. I'm 60 pounds, 70 pounds overweight. This is this is not good for me. And we decided to exit the agency, and we transitioned the entire agency over the course. It took us about 3 months from that decision to making that happen. And then eventually we had some big clients that actually pivoted themselves, like IBM and Cisco. They restructure every 2 years, and that kind of helped our decision even faster. And so we did that, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, because it just felt like I gave away our baby from those years. And I went into this dark place, where I actually thank God for my wife. She handled most of the transition, and we had a lot of work that we still had to fulfill to make good on all of that. And she managed most of it. And I went into kind of a little bit of a depression and a little bit of a place of, now what? Who am I? What am I going to be? What did I just do? I just killed both speaking and my agency all at the same time. It's like I went full into everything, and then I killed it all. And I was just in my gut, but I after about, I want to say 1 to 2 months of just sleeping in, started to get steps in every day, started to eat healthier food. I just took little shifts, little tiny steps into getting myself kind of back into understanding and feeling into who I am and who I wanted to be. And one day it just clicked. I am just happy just being here, and I don't need these other things to make me feel good about myself. I'm feeling good about myself, And that started a journey of like just figuring out, what am I going to put in my mouth every day that's going to make a better difference. But the thing that changed everything was the mindset. It was this feeling of knowing like, I don't need an audience to make me feel good. I don't need social media to make me feel good. And that's where I started to figure out that this is a different lifestyle. This is a transformation and a change I need to make. And when I was on my path and doing that, I started to realize that this is maybe something too that other people are facing, and I can help them. And that's where my coaching started. So I took everything that I learned from my agency and everything that I learned from overwhelm and burnout, and combined the two, and started helping people to create a much healthier life and to build a business or a lifestyle that would help them to create what they want, what they deserve, what their life's purpose is all about, and not go into that hole that I went into.
There is so much to say, but I think Susie probably encapsulates it best with five hearts. You said something that just blew me away. When you spoke about, you didn't need the likes, the follows, the friends, the faux friends, the audience, and so many people need that. So many people actually need that ability. They need that affirmation. I don't know if Bryan, are you back?
I'm here. My microphone or my camera quit on me. So give me super quick second here. And
it's okay. This is a bad technology day. It is a good human day and a bad technology day. But Bryan, like what I was saying is, I don't know if you heard me the whole time, but it actually demonstrates, I mean, if I'm being honest, that public speakers and celebrities and social media gurus, they're all basically insecure narcissists until you actually come to terms with your humanity, and you come to terms with your heart, and you come to terms with helping people. And then it's like a switch. And it's liberating. It is the most beautiful thing to realize when you're standing on stage at TED, that it actually isn't about you, and it's never been about you. It's about the people's lives that you can touch, and about how you can use the gift, because you still have the gift. If not, I would say you have. If not that, you have even more of a gift, because now you have the intelligence, the wisdom, the insight, coupled with the humility and the empathy and all the things that are so sorely lacking in society right now.
Absolutely. It's I know people say this all the time, but it's one of those things, just like in the airplane, where you got to put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on anyone else. And when you're in deep overwhelm, when you feel like you can't make a change, you can't make a shift, you can't see your way forward, you don't know what, especially right now, we don't know what's going to happen. There's so much uncertainty right now that we have to be okay with uncertainty. And so our ability to be, and the level that we can be okay with uncertainty, is equal to the amount of joy that we can have in our lives. Yeah, well, and right now is represented by that. We don't control anything now, but what we can control is our level of joy by being okay with uncertainty. I know it's harder than it sounds, and it's really challenging to be okay with uncertainty when you don't know where maybe money is coming from, or where your next job is coming from, or your next project, or are we going to be out in the world again? But what we can see for ourselves is that we are what we're in control of is everything that is within us and around us. We can still take walks. We can still run. We can still take care of our health. We can still eat healthy. We can still have more connection, and more connection like this, which is a deep desire for every single human being. When we can be in connection with others, it just happens to be human to computer to human right now, but it's still connection. And when you fulfill all those different things for each of us, man, it makes a huge difference.
Leslie said, "Wow, uncertainty equals joy." They may not necessarily mean the same thing, but it's finding the joy within, and learning to, I suppose, operate within it, and realize, as the old saying goes, right, this too shall pass. Bryan, I created this little formula weeks ago, maybe months ago. This is how long we've been cooped up, which is the secret of success is love what you do. This is according to me, so it's just a sample size of one. Love what you do, be true to yourself, and then just stay the course. Do it for endurance, the concept of the marathon. And I think that's, even when things are going to hell around you, it's the ability to just weather the storm, put your head down. It's probably I don't know what you did to lose the weight. I run, but that to me is the gift of running, the concept of endurance.
Yeah. For me, food is my weakness. I absolutely love food. It's one of the greatest gifts that we ever got. And I still love it, but I had to have a new relationship with food. And I had to understand that there is not a scarcity of food, that it's always going to be there, and I can always have more. And I needed to understand that food was not oxygen. It wasn't what I didn't need it as much as I thought I did. And there was a lot of the ways that I had to look at it that changed how I moved forward. And the biggest thing was really that it wasn't about the food. It was about making small little changes, making small little shifts. We talk about pivots right now, and I think most of the time it's actually not a pivot, it's a shift. And we have to be really careful about that, because when we're talking about our business or our life or the way that we even eat or how we exercise, we're thinking, well, I just need to get out and run 5 miles every day and then I'll be healthy. Well, you can't just get out and run 5 miles if you've never run before. Trust me, I know that. What you can do is you can get out and you can run a half a block to a block or a couple blocks. And then the next day you run a little bit more. And then the next day you run a little bit more. And the next day you run a little bit more. And you celebrate each time you've done that. And you come back and you feel rewarded by having made small shifts that create such a large outcome. Let me give you an example of how this might work on an even bigger capacity. If you were to look at an aircraft carrier, aircraft carriers today are massive, right? And aircraft carriers still have a GPS system on them that has to be recalibrated one time a year, sometimes twice. And I've talked to the GPS recalibrators. They go in and they actually have to recalibrate it, because over the course of a year, a GPS system can be off by 1 full degree. Now, 1 degree difference for an aircraft carrier is 277 miles. And you think about 277 miles of an aircraft carrier being off target of where it's heading. And all it needs is a 1 degree recalibration. I think the same thing applies to humans and businesses. That sometimes we're looking at making pivots and then it becomes daunting to us. And instead we need to look at how do we create little shifts? Because then we can actually get them done and we can create much bigger reward system for us as we're moving forward?
I'm trying to digest this because it's such an original point. I feel it's not something, because everybody talks about the pivot and how cliched or overused it's been. I mean, I personally have spoken about how I've reinvented myself during a global pandemic, and maybe reinvention isn't a pivot at all. Maybe in fact maybe it is a shift, or maybe it's something else. But the thing about the shift that I think is so interesting is it's a small tweak. It's not an incremental, because that's the other thing that I'm struggling with. We say, moves should be exponential, not incremental. But in this case, it's a small change that you can make today that can have a massive impact. It's almost like a butterfly effect.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to wrap my minds around how to build onto that. Maybe in the after show, we can talk a little bit more about this concept. But it's a very, very strong idea. And as you know, Bryan, I mean, I've struggled. We've both struggled with weight, and what do they say? What's the old joke? Fought anorexia and won. I mean, it's a bad joke, but it's a joke. But the thing is, what do they say? The first step is the hardest step, and it is the most important step. But it is a step. It's a single step. It's a shift, not a pivot.
Yes, that's exactly right. And the next day is just a shift, and the next day is just a shift. And if you look at it that way, and you see all the little things that makes a difference. I don't know if you're familiar with Rudy Rudiger. He was the last college football player to be carried off the field at Notre Dame College. This was 30 years ago, maybe 35 years ago. He was 5'4". He played one game at Notre Dame.
That was the movie Rudy, right?
It's the movie Rudy. Yeah. So he was the second from the bottom in his class in high school, and should not have gone to Notre Dame, and should never have played football at Notre Dame. And he's from a family of 14 kids, all destined to work at the local oil refinery. Moved through every single one of those things by making small I interviewed him, and one of the things that he said is that by making small shifts, by looking at his grades first and saying, okay, how am I going to correct my grades at a community college? I just have to get through that. And then he did that, and then he went and he couldn't run for anything. He said, I had to just see if I could run around a track, and would start in on that. And then he looked at the next thing and said, okay, now that I got my grades, I have to get into Notre Dame. And then the next thing is, how do I show up every day just to get seen by the team and by the coach? And so each thing happened as a shift, while we look at it as a pivot at the end of the day, because we watch this movie and we see him being carried off a field and in this unbelievable thing. He never saw it that way. And we all don't see it that way in our own lives, but eventually it does and can create a pivot that can happen later on down the road. But right now, it's just the shift that needs to happen.
I mean, it's basically this idea that if you had to reconcile them, right? A pivot really is just a series of consistent shifts, and we look back, at the pivot, but the reality is it was anything but. It was anything but. And if we draw this, let's bring it back to corporations, and let's bring it back to H2H for a second, right? Because for me, the ultimate shift for an organization is the golden rule, is customer service, is the extra smile, a little bit of heart, instead of your call is important to us and will be answered in the order it was received. It's the ability to actually answer the phone quickly and spend a little bit more time. That's why we celebrate the Zappos story, you know, the Zapposes of the world with respect to somebody calling customer service and ordering a pizza, and they deliver a pizza. They deliver the pizza. So why do you, maybe let's take a step back, and I would, you know, you are the father of H2H. This is your real baby. The agency wasn't the baby. H2H is the baby. Talk a little bit about human to human, and then maybe, you know, why, as I was saying, corporations are just struggling to demonstrate that humanity, and in this case, you know, demonstrating it through shifts as opposed to pivots.
Yeah, well, the platform for H2H was built on originally where we were at 7 years ago, 6 to 7 years ago, when social media was fresh on the scene, which feels like it was so long ago, but social media is really kind of new. It's not that old. And one of the things that became known, or we all started to realize, is that social media changed how we interact forever. One of the things that changed radically is that now people could talk about brands in a public forum, and brands didn't really have control over that. And so they quickly had to figure out how they were going to level up, level in, have that conversation, and engage with their customer and their potential customer. Some failed at it, and some did a really great job. And quite frankly, it's still a struggle. I don't think anybody's, it's not as much of a conversation anymore because it's table stakes, but it's still a conversation. Or it's still a challenge. One of the things that H2H was founded in was, how do you engage in that conversation? As well, it's how does a brand interact? So in the platform and in the pillars of H2H, we created these 3 pillars, which is simplicity, empathy, and imperfection. They're kind of like what you were just talking about. How do you have empathy for your customer? Empathy is lacking right now. We talked about imperfection of Gaylord Fokker, and then we've talked about each one of these, and they always come up in conversation, but they've never actually been assigned to how do you build the most human company possible. Now, if you think about a brand, I'll walk through each one of these. Simplicity. What comes to mind for a brand that embraces simplicity?
Probably Apple. You mean like what company? Or yeah, I would think Apple.
Yeah, right. You can name off almost if not every single one of their products. And you can get the product within 2 to 3 clicks. Very easy to order, and customer service is straightforward. They've got a Genius Bar, a very human-driven company with their storefronts. You feel connected into them, and they're transparent when they need to be. It's a very neat company when it comes to simplicity. When you think about who embraces empathy, who comes to mind?
I mean, for me, and it's a company that I wrote about in Flip the Funnel, was USAA, and there are others like Zappos, but it's generally the companies that offer a superior customer experience.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great example. And I can vouch that, being a USAA member. And then when you look at what company, and the key here is who embraces imperfection, because every company is imperfect, but who embraces imperfection?
Well, that's an interesting one. I mean, the first thing I thought of was that there are now companies that have built their entire business model around imperfection, like Imperfect Foods. But then I go back to, funnily enough, I go back to Apple, and I'll tell you why. Because Apple is still a company that will put out a product with flaws, with battery gates, with, you know, it's a weird example to give you, but it was almost in contrast with Microsoft, where Microsoft was, you know, it was the done is better than perfect. That was Apple's mantra, and poor Microsoft just had to be perfect, and then they made the smallest mistake and they got vilified for it. Ironically, I think that's flipped a little bit, and it's Microsoft's now imperfections that have actually allowed it to grow and rise again. But who do you think, when it comes to who comes to mind when you think of imperfection?
A lot. I'll just give one example, which is Dove. I think Dove embraces the imperfections of humans, and they've done a fantastic job in bringing forward how imperfectly perfect humans are, and celebrating the beauty of all humans. Then the question becomes what brands embrace all three, and I'm not going to put you through that, but it's very few. It's really hard for brands to embrace all three at the same time, because they're usually facing one at a time, maybe two, and they don't look at being human as an approach to how they are in the world. What they're looking at is, how do we market our company? How do we sell our company? How do we sell our product? How do we brand our product as individual strategies? But if we were to up-level that and first have the conversation of what is a human company and how are we going to do that first, and then align our strategies to that, it would make a whole
which is a company that you think really over delivers on all three, because maybe the answer is it's one of those. It's like the moon, right? You'll never get there. You seem like you're driving towards it, but you'll never quite get closer to it. As a kid, you'd always be like, chase the moon, Dad.
Yeah, so I would say that small businesses have a leg up when it comes to being all three. And some medium businesses. When we look at enterprise, it becomes harder. And so small businesses, your mom and pop and small, your accounting firm, your construction company that comes to help renovate your house, or dry cleaners down the street. We're all buying from people who are empathetic and asking questions. Maybe they're not all that way, but some of them really care about you, and they say, how are the kids when you walk in the store? And they like this is what's missing from some of the enterprise larger. We lose that as we get bigger, and I would actually say that this may not be a popular answer, but I would say Amazon, if we're going to look at a large company, does a fairly good job. If you want to return your product, it's no questions asked and easy to return. That's not the case actually with local stores. I've been charged restocking fees to return a product, and that's not very good when you're not happy with the product and it's not doing what they said it should do. There's so many different aspects of Amazon and their customer service, will talk with you, and you can get through to a person if you really need to in chat or online very easily. You can purchase anything anywhere, and it is kind of simple. I mean, they turned an e-commerce your mega e-commerce store into a much easier way to buy just about anything. So I'm going to go with Amazon as the closest to an enterprise level that has all three. And I would say Apple's up there too. Mm-hmm. But those two are there for me. Can you think of one?
So I would, by the way, Chip says all companies like humans are flawed. Each has strengths and weaknesses. But I would say, just to add to that, which is when they embrace the flaws, that's when they elevate. That's when they say, I don't know the answers. That's when the company doesn't have to say, we're all in this together. We better make a statement about Black Lives Matter, because that's when a company actually says, hey, you know what? We're trying to figure it out right now. We're not really sure. We need to listen a little bit. It's that humanity. You're
right.
David says, I used to like it when I was greeted when walking into a Walmart. And that, I think, is the problem when we hide behind technology, and also when we try and automate. Ironically, when his camera the camera went kind of wonky again. We definitely, I don't know what's going on, but it's coming back.
I'm here.
It's all right. You can see me, and I can see all your your chest, which is clearly you've been working out. I mean, it's
You like that? It's actually exactly what I
This is the bench press as well. Leslie says weight. Yeah, I mean, although they do have some negative press, but who knows? So I'm going to give you two. I already gave you Apple in terms of simplicity. The iPod, right? Stop, play, pause, rewind, fast forward. Jobs coming in and reducing all their SKUs to like 20 in the whole store. The imperfection, knowing that they almost seemingly, the example I always use is when the iPhone came out. It's like, surely you knew about video, or, they always seem to be like 10 steps behind the Galaxy. And yet, like Coke and Pepsi, nobody cares, right? And the empathy, from the Genius Bar to the number of humans in a store, to the fact that, again, not only can you get someone on the phone within minutes or make an appointment on the phone, but they will give you their personal extension and their email address so you can follow up with them. The other example, and I know we're using the obvious ones, but what I say in Built to Suck, Bryan, is I say, this is why I'm giving you the obvious ones, because I want you to understand why we talk about these companies, why they do so well. So for me, it's Starbucks, and which is a weird thing, because it's a little bit more esoteric. Why? Because you can still go in there and say, I'll just have a cup of coffee. I'll just have a drip. So there is the complexity, but there's also the simplicity as well. So that's the first point. The empathy, when two African American men were, arrested because someone called the cops on them, Starbucks shut down every single one of their stores to do sensitivity training. And so there's always been, maybe again that's changed. These may not be, I'm sure people will push back. And the imperfection, I think, also comes back to the fact, if you don't like your drink, we'll make it again for you, which is, there's a lot of bells and whistles and experimentation and new products. But at the end of the day, if you don't like it exactly the way you like it, that's the Starbucks pledge. Yeah. So I think you have to go a little bit deeper and maybe reach a little bit, but I see elements of all three in a brand like Starbucks.
Yeah, absolutely. And now look at how everybody's affected. Yeah, right, Chip. Although I do love Starbucks, but I love just getting the points. So their gamification is spot on. One of the things that I think is kind of interesting is now you can pull up to Domino's, you can pull up to Whole Foods. There's other brands too, and they have the contactless concierge, if you will, where they open your trunk, they put your food or your pizza or your whatever you bought into your trunk and close it. You never really talk to someone. They just wave you on and say goodbye. Now there's missing connection there. And I said this to my wife the other day, but this concierge level of service that has showed up in the last 4 months was always possible. And that level of service is such a level of red carpet treatment, 5-star, whatever you want to call it, treatment. And yet we don't innovate like that unless we have to, and create these little opportunities, again, I'll go back to it and circle back around to like the little shifts that make a difference that really help people out. And it's a huge thing I think we should probably pay attention to, is what just innovated in the last 4 months that made a difference to you in your life, that could have been done all along. And now, knowing what you know now, what could you do in the next 4 months that has been there all along, to humanize your business, to create more of that connection or that ease or that customer service value. It's sitting right in front of us. So it's fascinating.
So give me an example of one of those, and I'm going to also I'm going to also think about a couple of examples. I mean, I'll start just while I'll give you a chance to think about it. I think one of them, clearly the obvious one, is the fact that we don't actually need to commute 2 to 3 hours a day and have to be present 9 to 5 days a week. And there are hybrid models that not only work as well, arguably work even better.
Yeah, absolutely. It's teaching us, those that don't work from home, a new way to work that has been there all along. Zoom didn't just start 6 months ago. And I would add to that by saying, we now celebrate birthdays in our family all together on one call, rather than calling that person all day long in 50 separate phone calls. We do the same thing for anniversaries and for holidays for the last 4 or 5 months. Getting on an hour call and making somebody feel special has gone way farther than it's ever been before, when yet again, that technology has been around and the ability to do it has been around, but we just changed the way we approach it.
Oh, I like that. I like that example. Okay, here's another one. For the first time, you can call up a company and you can say, "Hey, I'm struggling. I'm not doing well. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make the payment this week or this month." And you know that they're not only are they not going to judge you, they're going to go, "All right, well, here's what we have. We can lower your APR. We can give you a moratorium. We can do forgiveness. We can move the mortgage out. We've got all these systems in place." Why not have those systems in place permanently when your customer calls up and says, "I'm struggling right now"? Isn't that the ultimate empathy?
Oh man, isn't that great when you can, and something behind that is that people feel like they can call, or that not the worst case is they're going to say no. And the way that the response is happening is so spot on to having empathy for how everyone's feeling right now. You're absolutely right. You nailed it. One of the things that I'm also super intrigued with is not having to drive anywhere to have experiences. We used to think that, and don't get me wrong, I do miss a little bit of travel and I miss certain things, but our experiences are something that we're now making time for in our homes. One example is I bought my parents, Courtney and I bought my parents a cooking package, and then they send you the recipe with everything that you need to buy, a shopping list, and they Instacarted it, got it all sent to their house, and then got on Zoom. There was 4 other couples, I think, and walked them through for 4 hours, actually making this brunch. And then we went over there and socially distanced and got to partake in the aftermath of all that, which was awesome. But the fact that you can have experiences in your home or where you're at, and it doesn't have to cost a lot of money, and you can feel like you had a full day it's an updated way of being. And then you look at Airbnb, and they've you might even say that they have pivoted. While you can still go and stay at Airbnbs, half of their site now is about experiences. So you can buy experiences on Airbnb, like cooking or like even meditating, on kite surfing. Like they're endless. And so they've now added in experiences as part of their offer.
And to that end, someone might have described that as a pivot, but it's really just a shift.
It kind of is, right?
At the end of the day, I mean, I last year, my wife and I went to Istanbul and Athens, and we spent 2 days in each city, and we used a company called With Locals, where our tour guide was a local, and With Locals themselves has gone through, through the pandemic, has actually reached out to all of their guides who will now teach you Greek or teach you, teach you their language, or how to cook, or art appreciation, or history. So being able to just create, as you say, to your point, an experience that doesn't involve, hiking up to the Acropolis in 99-degree weather, which was bloody hot, I might add. So I want to show you something, which is, let me see, even though my PowerPoint died, I think I have the ability to do this still. I still got a few tricks up my sleeve. So this, I normally do, what you don't know, Bryan, is I always have a quote from a famous, person, and then I try to stump my guest to see if they know who said this. But in this case, you said it. I think it just absolutely, without, from a sublime standpoint, it just epitomizes kind of what we've been talking about, right? Mm-hmm. I'll read it. Human beings are innately complex, yet strive for simplicity. Our challenge as humans is to find, understand, and explain the complex in its most simplistic form. This means you, marketers, find the commonality in our humanity and speak the language we've all been waiting for.
I just think it's well said. I don't know if I have anything to add.
Yeah,
I kid.
What did you mean by that? No. But I think it's great because, at the end of the day, all a corporation is just a facade. It's just a container. It's an inanimate container of human beings who are flawed. And therefore, when you aggregate it and recognize that the corporation should embrace that same what is it to be human? It is to be flawed. It is,
right.
But I think what I loved about this is the overlay, if you will, of simplicity and complexity, and of course the other word that we've discussed a lot today is, how it's all connected to empathy and imperfection, because that's the point. At the end of the day, they're not mutually exclusive. It is that consummate Venn diagram where they feed each other and are interconnected, right?
The other piece to it that I described below in the language we all speak together. The reason that I said that is because when you go into a company, I'm sure you guys have all seen this. Every company has its own speak. It has its own language. There are acronyms for different things that apply to the company and the industry that they're in. And oftentimes as a new employee, when you start at that company, it takes you a while to catch on with the language. And what happens is that language finds its way from the inside out. The complexity that I'm talking about is buried inside. It's burned into the ethos of the company to the point where we speak it so often we don't realize that others don't speak that same language, and it finds its way into our materials and in our marketing and into our way of being, and we then make it too complex. We are the reason it's too complex. We're doing that to ourselves inside the companies. Now, if we were to actually get rid of acronyms and not have to, we joke because at our agency, we used to say every time we got a new client, we need an acronym definition book for each company and just build that for the agency so we can all understand what it was faster that we're all talking about. And if we didn't have to do that, if we brought the language down into its truest form, into its most simplistic form, you would find a way of describing what you do to your customers in a way easier manner.
Or the only acronym that I think we'll permit today is KISS, right? Which is keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
We get back to simplicity. I want to because I didn't have, all of my bells and whistles to share with you, as I said, I still was able to find a few more. But this is up. I just pulled this up. This is your book, Shareology: How Sharing is Powering the Human Economy, and it is so powerful. And I think we spoke today about generosity, and we spoke about empathy, and we spoke about the connectivity. It is all encapsulated in this idea of shareology. But there's one more thing that we're just going to touch on just before you go, my friend, which is I don't have the before and after, but I have two questions to ask you. Well, first of all, you can definitely see some of the befores. The after is the after is looking at you in the flesh right now. The mean, the lean, the green, the mad, the bad, the dangerous to know. But my question to you is, who is the other dude that comes up when you type Bryan Kramer? Because and how can we take him down? Who is this man?
It's funny. I get outreach and followers for people thinking that I'm him. He's a politician somewhere in South America, and he's a rebel. So I actually identify with him a lot because he's for he's for the good and the cause. And from what I can read up on him, I actually like him a lot. And I'm happy that we are both on the same screen together from what I can see. But yeah, there's a lot of that I get. You get the Google alerts of when you got mentioned, and he and I share quite a list there. So I'm happy to share with him though.
And I keep on getting this Joe Jaffe, who is always reporting on soya beans, not Goya beans, but soya beans.
Wow.
So like I have no interest in understanding the quarterly event, and he seems to be reporting on these soybeans a lot. This almost didn't happen, but I'm so glad it did. We didn't need, we proved the point, right? That at the end of the day, humanity prevails. This has been Bryan Kramer, who is a keynote speaker, best-selling author, performance coach. I saw you are the coach of coaches. You coach the coaches. You can find out more about Bryan at his wonderful website, bryankramer.com. You can follow him, and you produce a lot of content, right? You just produced a piece on why it's good to be the underdog, which I was going to reference, but then I had my crash, so I didn't. But you can find out about it, and Bryan's going to join us at the after show. On the after show, and there's so many things to talk about. One of the things that I know that we almost thought we would talk about is this idea of how do you spot opportunities, and how do you know when the timing is right, and how do you keep moving forward when the landscape keeps on shifting, the goalposts keep on moving. Maybe that's how we'll start the after show. But Bryan, it's been an absolute pleasure to reconnect with you, and I hope it doesn't take another 4 years and 20 pounds or 30 pounds for us to do it again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad that it's given us the opportunity here to connect in this way, and I'm also looking forward to being able to sit down and share a coffee or a beer with you.
I hope so. Very, very soon. Corona TV will be back on Monday. And for those of you that haven't done this yet, I'm now pivoting and shifting my newsletter to really feed more directly into the show. So by subscribing to the newsletter, you just have to text the word Corona TV to 66866. You will find out highlights of the week's shows that have just passed. All my seated soliloquies, all the copy will be available, the lyrics, if you will. And also I will preview my guest for the next week. But it's been a wonderful week, and it ended on a high with you, Bryan. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.